Let's get one thing straight. This story didn't just take a weird turn. It veered into uncharted hellscape territory. Because it's not every day that a guy shoots up a Trump resort in a full-blown mental breakdown, and then from a jail cell, calmly tells the world, "Oh, by the way, I was being used as a sex slave by Diddy Combs and Cassie Ventura." This story is far from over. The trial is just getting started, and every day brings new revelations. If you want to stay informed and ahead of the headlines, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're covering the courtroom, the fallout, and what this means for the future of hip-hop. Don't miss a beat. Subscribe now. Let that sink in. Forget the tabloids. Forget the clickbait. This isn't some throwaway headline from a fringe conspiracy site. This is a man sitting in a jail cell, with nothing left to lose, giving an on-the-record interview, and what he's saying. It's enough to make the most jaded media watchers pause. Because whether you believe Jonathan Oddie or not, one thing is clear, something's not adding up. He's not just throwing names around. He's naming dates, locations, events, recording footage, signing documents, NDAs, multi-million-dollar hush money payments. A sudden real estate spree in Florida? Where'd that come from? This man is sitting in a cell, facing decades behind bars, and he's talking like someone who's been holding a secret for way too long. And now, he's not protecting anyone. Not anymore. Let's go straight to the jaw-dropper, the alleged $5 million NDA. Allegedly signed by Diddy. Meant to buy silence. To bury whatever happened behind closed doors in those sessions Oddie describes. According to him, it wasn't just wild. It was traumatic. It was dehumanizing. And it was transactional. Not a party. A payment. Not an accident. A system. Now here's where it gets even messier. Because while Diddy's camp hasn't confirmed or denied any of this, the lack of a strong denial. Deafening. No press release. No completely false statement. Just silence. And in this moment, when every headline is a landmine, that silence feels like a strategy. Or worse, it feels like fear. Because if this NDA is real, and if that video Oddie claims to have recorded does exist, it's not just a scandal. It's a circuit breaker in the middle of an already exploding firestorm. Because remember, Diddy is already on trial for sex trafficking. Cassie has testified to years of coercion, control, surveillance. And now suddenly, a man with nothing to gain claims he too was used, silenced, and paid off? You're telling me that's just coincidence? Let's talk about those Florida real estate deals. According to Oddie's ex-wife, she had no idea where the money came from. No lottery win. No inheritance. Just a sudden surge of cash. And now, in hindsight, she's connecting the dots. That windfall followed shortly after the date he claims to have signed the NDA. That timeline, conveniently aligned. And that ex-wife, she's not smiling. She says she was lied to, shut out, left in the dark while her husband spiraled. And now, he's in jail, facing attempted murder, burglary, armed robbery. But here's the kicker. Those charges, serious as they are, aren't even the weirdest part of this story. Because the part that makes your skin crawl is the claim that he felt enslaved. Trapped in a dynamic where he was being used and discarded. Filmed. Drugged. Controlled. Sound familiar? That's exactly what Cassie said happened to her. The difference. She was famous. He wasn't. So when she testified, the court leaned in. When he spoke, people rolled their eyes. But maybe they shouldn't. Because here's what people forget. Trauma doesn't always look like the victim you expect. Sometimes it comes from someone already broken. Someone unwell. Someone whose mind has frayed at the edges from years of silence, secrecy, shame. And if that's what Jonathan Oddie is, then this case just got a lot darker. Because if even a shred of what he's saying is true, if he really was brought into Diddy's orbit, used, and then paid off, then this isn't just about what happens at the top. It's about who gets destroyed at the bottom. And the idea that someone could be suffering in plain sight, while billionaires keep buying silence with contracts and payouts, that should terrify all of us. Because what happens when one of those people doesn't stay quiet? We get stories like this. And now the media's scrambling. Do they run it? Do they ignore it? Do they investigate or risk giving a man facing serious charges a platform? And that's the moral knot, isn't it? Adi is in jail for a violent crime. His credibility shaky. His history disturbed. But what if that's the point? What if the system chewed him up years ago, and now this outburst, this confession, is the only way he has left to scream? And what if that video he says he has surfaces? Because if that happens, everything changes. And for Diddy, that's a nightmare scenario. Because no matter how expensive your lawyers are, no matter how many NDAs you've stacked like bricks around your reputation, you can't argue with a camera lens. Not anymore. So now we're sitting in a world where the man who once ran Bad Boy Records is being accused, by someone in jail for attempted murder, of buying silence after coercive sexual encounters. Let that echo for a minute. This isn't just a scandal anymore. It's a fever dream that somehow became real life. You've got a shooter at a Trump property, a self-proclaimed victim of bipolar mania, a recording that allegedly captured high-powered celebrities in drug-fueled chaos, and a $5 million non-disclosure agreement tied up with a signature that reportedly belongs to Sean Diddy Combs. You couldn't write this if you tried. And if you did, you'd be told it was too far-fetched even for Netflix. But this is where we are. Because even if some of what Jonathan Adi says sounds like a wild stretch, that doesn't mean none of it is true. And let's talk about that uncomfortable truth. Because Adi's criminal record doesn't automatically erase the possibility that he was exploited. That's the whole problem with the power dynamic here. People with status, money, and PR teams can make victims look crazy before the first headline even prints. And who's going to believe the guy in jail over the guy who was on yachts with billionaires? It's a tale as old as time. We just put better lighting on it now. But here's the thing. Adi isn't vague. He's specific. He's naming names, places, dates. He's linking the alleged hush money to a real-world paper trail, property buys, financial jumps, a conveniently timed divorce where his ex-wife is asking, "Where did all this money come from?" That's not nothing. Because in most wild accusations, there's no real-world anchor. But in this one, there are receipts. They may not be confirmed, but they exist. Screenshots. A signature. The Daily Mail sniffing around. These are not your usual tinfoil hat allegations. And let's not forget the NDAs. If you're Sean Combs and this is entirely false, why not call it that? Loudly. Publicly. Drag this man's claims through the mud. Sue for defamation. Issue a 10-paragraph statement with legal firepower behind every word. But so far, silence. Strategic silence, sure. But silence nonetheless. And in 2024, silence speaks volumes. Because everyone knows how NDAs work in Hollywood. They're not used just for privacy. They're used to protect predators. They're signed in hotel lobbies, during settlement meetings, after incidents that can never be mentioned again. They're weapons, dressed up as contracts. And if Adi's claim is true, if he did get $5 million to shut up, then that's not just hush money. That's a payout for damage done. Which brings us to the part that makes your stomach twist. Adi says he recorded one of these sessions. He says he was scared. He says the behavior was erratic, fueled by drugs, and that he felt threatened, not just by what was happening, but by what would happen if he said no. And he recorded it. Not for fame, not for money, but for proof. Now maybe that sounds insane to you. But think about it, If you were in a situation where two people with immense power could bury you with a phone call and you had one shot to protect yourself, what would you do? You'd record. You'd protect your name. You'd keep something in your back pocket in case it all went south. That's not delusion. That's survival. Now let's look at the bigger picture here. Because if even some of this is true, if Diddy has been buying silence from people he allegedly exploited, it lines up with everything we've already heard from Cassie and other accusers. The control, the NDAs, the drugs, the sense that nobody could say no without facing consequences. Cassie said it. Others have hinted at it. Now here's a man with no incentive to lie, because let's be real, what does Audie get from this? Fame. He's in jail. Sympathy. The media already hates him. He gains nothing. And yet he's naming names anyway. Why? Because sometimes truth looks crazy. Especially when it's been buried for so long, the only way it can escape is by blowing a hole through the surface. And that's what this is. A hole. A rupture in the narrative. A reminder that just because someone's wearing a jumpsuit doesn't mean they're not telling the truth, and just because someone's in a mansion doesn't mean they're innocent. So where does that leave us? With a courtroom still reeling from Cassie's testimony. With Diddy's legal team doing damage control every hour of every day. With a media circus trying to make sense of a case that's now bleeding into completely unexpected territory. And with the looming possibility that Jonathan Audie isn't the last. Because if he was paid off, who else was? Who else got quiet checks and silent settlements? Who else was told to forget what they saw? The walls are cracking. The NDAs are losing power. And for the first time, it feels like the truth doesn't care who it burns. So to everyone still pretending this is just about one woman or one trial, wake up. This is about systemic power abuse, masked by celebrity. And the minute these videos surface, if they do, it's going to be the final nail in a coffin that's already closing faster than anyone expected. Let's stop pretending this is just some random footnote in an already messy story. Jonathan Audie didn't just claim he was enslaved by Diddy and Cassie Ventura for shock value. He didn't throw those names into the wind hoping they'd land somewhere viral. No, this wasn't trolling. This was a full-on detonation. Because Audie's not playing the game the way they expect. He's not looking for a deal. He's not looking for a Netflix series. He's not even trying to clean up his image. He's doing what people with nothing left to lose always do. He's speaking with brutal, unfiltered clarity. And the truth is, people like that, they're dangerous. Not because they're armed. Not because they're unstable. But because they'll tell the truth no matter who it burns. And in this case, it might burn the whole damn house down. Audie said what no one else has had the nerve to say out loud. I was used. I was exploited. I was paid off to forget. And that sentence right there, that's the smoking gun. Because it sounds a little too familiar, doesn't it? It sounds like every other Hollywood hush-hush settlement wrapped in an NDA and duct-taped with fear. But what makes this different is that Audie wasn't a known insider. He wasn't in the club. He wasn't in a relationship. He was, allegedly, an outsider dragged into something far darker than any party or PR photo would suggest. And now that he's in jail, they can't control him. They can't threaten to revoke a contract. They can't pull a fashion deal. They can't blacklist him. He's already behind bars. He's immune to the playbook. And that scares them. Because if he starts naming more names, if his recordings match up with other accusations, if his financial records reflect a sudden windfall suspiciously aligned with a rumored $5 million NDA, then the whole narrative, this entire empire built on swagger, legacy, and silence, starts to collapse. Let's talk about motive. Because that's what everyone's asking. Why would he say this now? Simple. He's got nothing left to protect. Not his reputation. Not his finances. Not his freedom. All he's got is time and rage, and stories that, if even half true, are going to make people squirm. He says he recorded one of the sessions with Diddy and Cassie. Not for leverage, not for TMZ, but because he was scared. Because he didn't trust that he'd make it out of there with his sanity intact. Let's stop for a second and think about that. This wasn't some secret affair gone wrong. This was a man who says he was pulled into a scenario where his autonomy was stripped from him, where drugs and threats and sexual coercion were normalized, where the only way he thought he could protect himself was by hitting record. And if that recording exists, everything changes. Every denier, every enabler, every co-conspirator on the hook. Because if that video surfaces and even remotely aligns with Cassie's descriptions of freak-offs, of sexual manipulation, of trauma masked as consent, then it's not just a pattern. It's a system. And that means RICO doesn't just apply to drug lords and mob bosses. It applies to moguls. Let's go even further. Audie's ex-wife claims she had no idea where the money came from. One day, they were living modestly. The next, boom, property buys, lifestyle upgrades. All lining up suspiciously close to when Audie allegedly signed the NDA. Do the math. That's not a financial glow-up. That's hush money. And if the paper trail confirms that timeline, the implications are explosive. It shows that there are layers to this story. Legal documents, financial transfers, people behind the scenes who knew what was going on and facilitated it anyway. And here's the worst part. This wasn't buried by accident. It was buried on purpose. And only now, when Diddy's house of cards is trembling, is it crawling back into the light. You think this is the last accusation? You think Jonathan Audie is the last one to say, "Me too"? You're dreaming. Because if there's one thing these cases have taught us, whether it's Epstein, R. Kelly, or Weinstein, it's that the first voice is never the last. It's the one that gives the others courage. It's the one that cracks the silence. And Audie's voice might be unpolished, chaotic, unfiltered, but it's real. It's specific. It's pointing directly at the very empire Diddy is desperately trying to protect. So now the media's scrambling. Some outlets are touching the story. Most are running from it. Why? Because it's messy. It's hard to verify. And let's be honest, no one wants to take the risk of airing the words sex slave and Diddy in the same headline unless they've got ironclad proof. But proof? It might be coming. That signature page. That real estate activity. That interview. Those files. And once someone finds the one document, the one transfer, the one timestamp that ties it all together, it's not a headline anymore. It's a trial. It's a collapse. And Hollywood's watching in terror. Because Diddy isn't just a person. He's a hub. A magnet. An anchor. His parties, his deals, his inner circle. They're full of people who also looked the other way. People who also benefited. People who also might be on the other side of a subpoena if this blows up the way it's about to. And make no mistake, it is blowing up. Because here's the truth that people in power forget. You can only bury the bodies for so long. Eventually, someone starts digging. And Jonathan Audie? He brought the shovel. So now we wait. For a second voice. A second document. A second recording. Because one is a scandal. But two is a case. And Diddy's already drowning in cases. Cassie. The federal sex trafficking probe. The civil suits. The mounting claims that paint him as not just a problematic artist but a criminal operator. So go ahead. Dismiss Audie if you want. Call him unstable. Call him desperate. But don't ignore the cracks he just blasted into this story. Because sometimes, the people you least expect have the most damning truths. So let's cut through the noise and get to the heart of what's actually going on here. We're not just dealing with one man's breakdown. This isn't just some deranged footnote in Diddy's already crumbling empire. This is a symptom, a leak, a fracture in the dam of silence that has kept 1,000 dirty secrets buried under PR smiles and luxury sunglasses. Jonathan Audie's accusations weren't whispered in passing. They were confessed from inside a jail cell. You don't casually name-drop Sean Combs and Cassie Ventura as your abusers, unless you've completely snapped or you're finally done being afraid. And that's the dilemma, isn't it? Do we write this off as delusion, or do we pause, just for a second, and ask why this keeps happening around the same man? Because it's not just Cassie anymore. Not just the lawsuits. Not just the NDAs piling up like parking tickets outside a nightclub. Now, even strangers, unconnected to fame, fortune, or contracts, are crawling out of the chaos to say, "This man controlled me too." Audie says he was exploited, that he recorded evidence, that he was silenced with a $5 million NDA, that he walked away from that world not empowered, not enriched, but shattered. His life, in pieces. His name, scorched. His mental health, torn to threads. And yet, despite everything he's facing, everything he's done, he's pointing the spotlight right back at Diddy. So, ask yourself, who benefits from that? Not Audie. Not in any rational way. He's not being paraded through morning shows or rebranded as a misunderstood activist. No. He's in an orange jumpsuit, pacing a cell, while the media picks apart his past instead of asking what he might have witnessed. Because what if he's not lying? What if there really was a night, or many nights, where the mask slipped, and the truth was as ugly as the worst of what's been whispered? What if he did see the inside of a freak-off? What if he was threatened, coerced, filmed, drugged? What if the real story isn't that Audie's crazy, but that he's not the only one with a story like this? That's what makes this so terrifying. Because once you start connecting the dots, a picture starts to form, and it's not abstract. It's clinical, organized, deliberate. Cassie said it. Other accusers have said it. Now Audie's saying it. All different people, different timelines, different vantage points. But the same keywords keep surfacing. Control, manipulation, surveillance, NDAs, silence. Are we seriously supposed to believe they all invented the same trauma with the same details? And let's talk about that silence. The silence of Hollywood. The silence of the music industry. The silence of those brothers who once slapped Diddy on the back on red carpets and toasted him in VIP rooms. Where are they now? The ones who shouted black excellence every time Diddy opened a bottle of champagne. The ones who called him a visionary. The ones who knew, somewhere deep down, that something was wrong with the way he moved, the way he acted, the way he treated people. They're quiet now. Suspiciously quiet. Because loyalty fades fast when indictments start flying. And let's not ignore how dangerous that silence really is. It sends a message. To survivors. To victims. To everyone watching from the shadows, wondering if they should speak. The message is, don't bother. We'll protect him. We'll call you crazy. Audie is just the beginning. He cracked the floorboards. Now the rot is visible. And make no mistake, there's rot. Let's get back to that alleged NDA. According to Audie, it wasn't some subtle settlement. It wasn't a clean break. It was a panic move, a $5 million fire extinguisher to put out a blaze that could have burned Diddy's image to the ground years ago. And now, that NDA might just be the fuse that blows the whole case wide open. Because if it's real, and if it's connected to the allegations Audie's now making, then it wasn't a settlement. It was hush money. And hush money is only needed when there's something to hide. People are acting like this is just a wild conspiracy because Audie has a criminal record. As if trauma is reserved for the perfect victims. As if abusers only target the innocent and the healthy. As if no one has ever been exploited because they were unstable, isolated, or vulnerable. Let me say it again for the people in the back. Unstable people get exploited too. In fact, they're easier to control, easier to gaslight, easier to throw under the bus when the truth gets messy. So when someone like Audie finally speaks, you don't roll your eyes, you listen. Because sometimes, the wildest sounding story is the one closest to the truth. And here's the part no one wants to talk about. What if that video he says he recorded still exists? What if it's real? What if he sends it to a journalist? What if it leaks? What happens to the narrative then? Because we all know how this goes. The media will try to explain it away at first. Context. Out of character. Edited footage. But if it matches the testimonies, if it shows even a sliver of what Cassie described, then it's game over. Then Diddy's empire isn't just sinking, it's condemned. Brands will pull out. Partnerships will vaporize. Streaming platforms will quietly delist albums. He'll be scrubbed from cultural memory faster than you can say, cancel culture. Because the only thing Hollywood hates more than a predator is a predator it can no longer spin. And once you can't spin it, you're done. So the question is, how many more people are holding secrets like Audie? How many more men and women were silenced with money, threats, or manipulation? Because if this was a one-time mistake, maybe the industry could look away. But it's not. This is a network of allegations, a web of NDAs, a parade of victims. And now, a Trump hotel shooter of all people is adding gasoline to the fire. And the timing couldn't be worse. Or, depending on your view, couldn't be more perfect. Because the world is watching now. The trial is underway. The press is circling. And Diddy's team can't suppress everything at once. If you've got skeletons in the closet, this is the worst possible moment to hear a knock at the door. And Audie, he didn't knock. He kicked it in. So what's next? More statements? More victims? That mysterious footage? Maybe all of the above. Because once the silence breaks, it never goes back to quiet. That's the power of truth. And that's the one thing Diddy's money, lawyers, and legacy can't buy. Let me know in the comments. Do you believe Jonathan Audie? Could his claims connect to the bigger allegations against Diddy? And do NDAs like this protect justice, or bury it? Subscribe, hit the bell, and stay locked in, because if that footage ever leaks, Hollywood's house of mirrors won't just crack. It'll shatter.